Joining us this morning are Allison Beddard, the Managing Principal for Washington State Operations of the global real estate firm Cushman Wakefield. She's based in downtown Seattle, where she oversees the strategic growth of the firm's business lines in the Seattle and Bellevue regions. Ron Klemencic, who's the Chairman and CEO of MKA. He's worked on projects in 25 states and 24 countries, including multiple block developments of up to 11.5 million square feet and towers up to 112 stories. Ron's known for his creative, big picture approach and his ability to consistently produce cost-effective and innovative designs. And our third panelist is Michelle Smith, the Chief Financial Officer at Woodland Park Zoo. She's responsible for providing strategic direction and leadership for all new and ongoing business and earned revenue opportunities. And she leads the departments of finance and budget management, human resources, information services, and guest services. All right. Now, as James did mention, we will be monitoring that Q&A box, the chat box. I filter those questions into the conversation the whole time. If you do want to ask a question with your voice and be recognized on the screen, you can raise your hand, and we'll do that very late in the program, like the final third of the program. Now, we have some questions we've prepared in advance, and we'll get to those in a moment. I always like to start things off with a few data points, kind of some hard numbers and things, and then a little bit about how we're feeling, given that it's November 18th, 2021. All right, here's a couple of numbers for us here. Office workers in downtown are hovering around 25% compared to the same week in 2019, which was the last pre-pandemic November. Foot traffic is around 68% compared to the same week in 2019. Obviously, the decreased office worker population is keeping that number down here on the verge of the big holiday shopping season. And globally, Cushman Wakefield estimates that 40% of the workforce has returned to the office as of September. Now, the downtown office vacancy rate is larger than we want it to be. It's currently at 12.3%. That's up from 5.2% 2 years ago, and the highest point since 2011 in the wake of the Great Recession, when it was 12.6%. So we've bounced back before, and I'm positive we'll bounce back again. On just kind of the subjective temperature check, how we're feeling about things, boy, it's a roller coaster for me. I am excited that kids are getting vaccinated. I'm excited that all adults will pretty much soon be able to get a booster shot if all goes according to the plan from the federal government. So it feels like we're poised on big happy things moving forward along the terms of the pandemic and everything that everyone's faced with as a small business owner or manager of a large business in downtown Seattle. All the signs look good. So I'm glad we have this panel together today to ask questions about what their personal experiences with their companies, with their organizations, what they've seen with their clients, and what their outlook is for the immediate near term. And with that in mind, I want to start things off with Allison Beddard. Cushman Wakefield has been doing all kinds of interesting research because of their position in China. Before the pandemic even unfolded, they were conducting all kinds of interesting research and sharing that with their clients and with the general public. And Allison, I wanted to check in with you and have you give us an update of what the latest findings are that you're seeing from the Cushman Wakefield research people around the world and here in the US, and what that impact that has on people here in Seattle who are facing some of these big decisions right now.
Sure. Well, good morning. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to get together on this important topic. We setting the stage, March 2020, was a very scary time, and we didn't know anything about the virus. Our company was fortunate to have a very large part of our business in China that had gone through it 3 months in advance. And so we had, published these guidelines. It was a 30-page manual to help employers, especially frontline workers, just to, conduct their jobs safely and try to weather, and figure this out. But where we've really turned our attention, just over the last 18, 20 months or so, is what does the return to office look like? And so we'll talk about our latest report is on the global return to office. We're doing a 3-part series on this, but we actually predict a return to office happening in the United States in approximately January, February of 2022. It's right around the corner. And this prediction is based on the assumption that the US COVID cases peaked in September of 2019, and that 200 million Americans, or about 62%, have been fully or partially vaccinated. And if the vaccine schedule continues at the same pace, herd resiliency will be achieved in the fourth quarter of this year. Um, and so with that in mind, nearly 40% of people are expected to return to office immediately after herd resiliency is reached. And
Allison, wait,
2/3.
just
Yeah.
pause you there for a second.
Mhm.
You said a figure there about September 2019. I want to confirm that was the date. That was
It
the,
was
did you mean 2021?
21,
Okay.
21.
And tell me about herd resiliency. That's not a term I'm super familiar with, and I'd be curious to get a little more explanation about what that actually
Yeah.
means.
So I think I guess simply put, resiliency meaning either you've had the virus or you've gotten vaccinated, as opposed to herd immunity, which I think was just based on getting vaccinated. So we're
Interesting. So
assuming for one or
sort
the
of
other.
it's a different kind of criteria than we've heard about, but it makes sense given that the
Hmm.
pandemic might become an endemic where we're living with this in a different way than we would have hoped
Hmm.
2 years ago, but not as bad as it would have seemed 6 months ago or a year ago. So, okay, continue. Thank you for clarifying.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to note too that vaccination programs, so vaccines are really the critical, it's what's given us the critical mass to return to office, made it even possible. And if we look back, December vaccination programs they started rolling out in December of 2020, but didn't really become readily available until March or April. And certainly in Washington state, right around that time period, a little after, right? But the prediction that we have based on return to office data indicates that as the vaccines increased, more employees returned to the office in larger numbers. So across the United States, the employee occupancy hit 35% in July of 21, and then it dipped slightly after the Delta variant, in August, which we're all aware of. So the other thing, though, I guess maybe the more important conversation that we're having right now with our clients and the community is the experience, the return to office and what that means, because we certainly don't mean return to office as returning to 2019, because things have changed. Things have fundamentally changed for everyone. And our workplace strategy team, I mean, they've compiled over 1 million data points into what they call our experience per square foot tool. And so factoring that in, what's interesting is the workplace strategy team showed that only like in 2019 and before, we only used about 60% of the desks on average in the United States. So on a daily basis. But what we're learning is, choice really matters. And we've also learned that people coming into the office 3+ days a week show higher levels of energy, higher levels of positive well-being, and a better work-life or life-work balance. And so really encouraging coming back, not meaning every single day, meaning some sort of hybrid approach. And two other data points, and I'll turn it back, is people with freedom to choose where they work outperform those without the freedom. And it goes so far as 74% of our folks surveyed reported an overall positive experience when they had choice. Only 45%, reported that positive experience when they didn't have a choice.
And yeah,
Mhm.
and with Cushman Wakefield, I mean, in terms of that, one thing that's interesting is this notion of like the 3 days a week, and the benefits of that versus mandatory 5 days a week.
Right.
How One thing that immediately leaps out for me is if you have a dozen employees or 100 employees, and
Mhm.
they're all there 3 days a week, but somebody's there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, somebody's there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. How have we figured out yet how to coordinate those kinds of nuances or subtleties around this 3 day a week approach?
So yes and no, right? So I think if we're using choice as the our marker or benchmark, it's going to come back on the employer to actually determine. I mean, absolutely, if we're going to, you can't have everybody coming in one day and this day and no one ever connecting. I mean, that's not where the innovation happens, and that's not where the employee well-being happens, right? So there has to be an alignment there. But I think putting it back into the employer or the employee, and surveying your employees, checking in with them, figuring out what maybe a team norm might be, so hey, we work Monday, Wednesday, and Thursdays together. We all agree, these are going to be the days. Maybe we're more flexible on Friday, or maybe we're more, this or that. But I think with that in mind, you'll get a better satisfaction. I think employees will appreciate, and they can kind of design their time and say, all right, I'll agree to that, right? That makes sense to me, so that I'm with my team on those days.
Yeah, it seems like one of these things, these are unanticipated parts of the pandemic that, we'll just have to figure out, and that will eventually become a given, and everyone won't even have to think about it too much, but we're just sort of at the early stages of figuring out what this all means. Ron Klemencic, I want to go over to you because your firm's been back in the office for a while. You have a very specific philosophy about how your team works best together and what that means to return to the office. So what's been the experience at MKA with your staff?
Well, it's been very positive since we've been back. We may be the outlier in the community.
That's why you're here. That's why we have you here this morning. We outlier in a good way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are back in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 4 core hours. But we feel an essential part of our business strategy. We're a design firm. We are most effective when we're collaborating and innovating together. Each and every day we're learning from each other. And we found over the pandemic trying to do scheduled Zoom meetings to interact and to learn and to innovate really impacted our overall effectiveness. And so July 6th, a week after the governor opened the state, we opened our offices in their entirety. We have 200 people in downtown Seattle. And today we're pretty much all back in the office and working full-time Monday to Friday.
Just a logistic question. How far in advance did you tell your staff that was the day everyone had to be back? I mean, it seems like communications is key to all these different things, whether it's information that's coming in or decisions being made about that and based on that information about how the company's going to move forward. That seems like, did you get pushback, or how much notice did people have?
Yeah, well, as we've all experienced, right, the rules seem to change almost hourly at one point. And so staying ahead of it and on top of it was very, very challenging. We did have monthlies, maybe an overstatement, but I'd say regular town hall meetings with the staff to just keep them apprised of what we were thinking, what we were observing and hearing from the guidance from the CDC and the state government and the city government, and letting them know from the beginning that our desire and our intention was to get back together in totality as soon as we could confidently do that in a healthy and safe way. And to that end, we spent a great deal of time early on, back in April of 2020, writing a pretty extensive, maybe that's an overstatement, but a healthy workplace protocol guidebook that we distributed to everybody. We gave everybody thermometers and kind of task lists to check their health. And it really has been effective in the sense that we haven't had any COVID transmission cases in the office at all through the entire pandemic. We have had a couple of COVID cases in the staff that were contracted outside of the office, but the staff's been really diligent in, when they're not feeling well, to stay home, get tested, and just be respectful of their colleagues. And it's really, really worked wonderfully well over the course of the last year and a half.
And how did you handle vaccine requirements or vaccine mandate, or checking if staff had received vaccinations or not?
Yeah, there again, we have left it to the choice of our staff to decide whether they be vaccinated or not. We have 200 staff, so we're not a huge company. By and large, everyone is vaccinated, but not by mandate, but by choice. We have not gone through yet, at least, any kind of formal documentation process other than we had staff sign and attest. And that's basically says, yes, I've been fully vaccinated and it's been 14 days since my last shot and blah, blah, blah. We just have them sign a piece of paper. Our thought being that we trust our staff to design some of the most incredible buildings in the world. Surely we can trust them to tell us the truth about their vaccination status. And so that's where we are today. Now, who knows, that may change as the government changes the rules. But for today, that's where we are.
And not to get all HIPAA or granular, but so everyone signed that, or
Yep.
Some people didn't? Okay, so, and you trust, okay. So interesting, huh? And what about with those people back in the office back in July and now in November, how do you handle masking indoors?
Right, so again, we've been pretty diligent. Well, we've been very diligent about following the guidance from the government and the CDC. And so where we are today is in our building, Rainier Tower, masks are required in the building in public spaces. That's not our requirement, that's our landlord's requirement. Once you move into our private space, when we're in group settings or in public areas of our office, we ask everyone to wear their mask. And that's just consistent with the guidance that we continue to get from King County and the state. Once you're at your workstation, and our workstations are such that everyone's naturally socially distanced, you're free to take off your masks, especially if you're doing Zoom calls or any other kind of computer interaction. People are maskless at their desks. And that's kind of where we are today. Again, that will change in time, but today that's where we're at.
And one more question for you, then I want to go over to Michelle at Woodland Park Zoo. A lot of people during the pandemic, early on anyway, moved cross country to be near family or to take care of an ailing relative or something. Did you end up having anybody like that who chose not to come back, or how did you handle those long-term employees who didn't want to come back to the office?
Yeah, we did have just a few who had moved back to various parts of the country to be with family or take care of family or what have you. And until this fall, we've been really pretty accommodating of those personal needs and wishes. All along, letting everybody know that our long-term objective is to have everybody back in the office working collaboratively on a regular daily basis. And so there was no surprise that in the fall, when we've gone to regular work hours in the office, a few of those employees chose not to come back. And we were sad to see them leave, but we run our business a way in which we feel is most effective for us. And that means being in the office. And if that doesn't match up with someone's personal choices, well, that's fine. We all move on.
I do want to come back a little bit later on and ask you, how quickly the mojo came back about having one there in the office, but I also want to hear from Michelle at the zoo. Michelle, your organization, which everyone I'm sure is familiar with, I mean, remote work for everybody certainly wasn't ever an option. What's it look like at the zoo nowadays? How are you guys handling your staff, the very staff you have, and how that all fits into returning to the office like this?
Sure. Well, back in March of 2022, we closed down. But as everyone knows, we have 1,000 endangered species on our property. So we can't just close down and walk away. We need to care for the animals that are in our care. And so we put some operational staff taking care of the animals, but also the grounds and some of the key areas of human resources and some of the areas that kept the offices running. But the majority of our employees went to a work from home kind of situation. Back in January of 2020, we started to put together a plan as we saw things going around in China. We were not sure what was going to happen over here, but we as an executive team got together and said, we need to be prepared if we're going to shut down, and what are we going to do with our employees? What was interesting about it, because I actually, IT reports to me, we had collaboration tools on our computer, but we never used them, and so we had Microsoft Teams, but we were never using it. Some teams were using it, some teams weren't. There was no, policy and procedures. And so immediately we had to educate and train everybody on these tools so that we would be able to collaborate, and we would be able to, work efficiently with half of the staff being at home and half of the staff being on the grounds taking care of the property. We have 92 acres, and so it's a lot to take care of, a lot of buildings and a lot of things. And then we were working on a reopen plan where we fully reopened to guests in July of 2020.
Okay. And so now, are you in like a hybrid model now, or what's it look like for your staff now?
So, you know what, it gave us an opportunity. We're in a hybrid model right now, and we're going to continue to be that way. We have engaged with CBRE that has put together a multi-year plan of how we're going to come back to the office. Currently, with the current environment, things have changed, and we realized we were growing and we knew that we were going to need more space, but we wanted to take the opportunity to really think about, what does the zoo of the 21st century look like? How, as we talk about, do we attract employees from other states that are dynamic? And so that's when we worked and really engaged with an expert like CBRE to put this multi-year plan together for us.
And you're a private nonprofit. I know you have a long-term contract with the city for operation of the zoo, but You're not subject to any of the public agency requirements around vaccination or anything like that at this point?
Well, I mean, we're a science-based organization and we like to work with the mandates of King County and the state and different things like that. And so, no, we are not required, but right now, most fortunately, with the 100-person policies, we do have to, we are working with them and we have a vaccine requirement for our employees right now. And so we have given them those notice, but before that was even in play, 90% of our staff were already letting us know that they were getting their vaccines. And, you know, animals also, as you've seen, can also get COVID. And so we have put in a lot of safety measures and procedures along with our own employees. And so we're very passionate about what we do. And there was no kickback around that. We are working through some personal accommodations, but we are, as of coming up in November, everyone will be fully vaccinated, or we have that information to show that. And we do require that of our vendors that are coming to our property right now too.
You know, and Ron was describing how at MKA, you know, it's really key for all their staff to be there in person to collaborate as a design firm and everything. Are there cultural issues, you know, sort of workplace cultural issues that have changed because of the pandemic that you're wrestling with now in terms of how to keep your team there as effective as they were before everyone scattered?
You know, actually, people are working 200%. And so I think what happens is people are missing the collaboration, the community, and that's why we're now engaging in a pilot program that we're going to start to bring people back to work. And people can come to the office. We just have a very strict contract tracing protocol. And if you are a remote work employee, you just need to inform your manager when you're coming into the office. There's a whole policy and procedure around it and access, but we are checking in and checking out every day with contact tracing with our employees, even though we still have the vaccine verification requirement.
Okay. Now, Allison, I know you made some big moves there with the Seattle office of Cushman Wakefield, and you did some very specific things in order to, I don't know, help revive the culture or reconnect people to the workplace. Can you tell us about how that worked out or how that's worked out so far?
Yeah, sure. I think I mentioned, I'm not sure, but I'm relatively new to Seattle. I moved up here in January 21, so right during the middle of the pandemic. And so personally, you know, trying to form relationships with my new team up here, trying to set a new tone. It's a new day and new investment, you know, with our firm up here. One of the first things was we were in a office space that it's a beautiful building, but the space itself was pretty dated and it had been closed for almost a year and everyone had worked from home. And so one of the first things I did, as you know, was make the decision to move our office and never go back to that space. I thought psychologically between the pandemic and, you know, a change in leadership and all of this stuff and new focus, it'd be important to open in a new environment. And so we moved to 2 Union Square. We opened a beautiful new office here and we officially welcomed people in May of 2021. And I made a concerted effort to come into the office every single day. I showed my face on camera, you know, in an effort, obviously, to connect with employees, but also to encourage them whenever, you know, if they felt safe and comfortable, but that there was an environment to go back to. And what was interesting about it is we have, you know, we had the social distancing in place. This was before vaccination, you know, protocols had come out. And so it was very much, you know, we wanted to make sure everyone had an equitable opportunity to come into the office. So like team A, team B, or a blue team, a red team, you know, stuff like that. But what we quickly found was there were segments of employees that had no interest in coming into the office. They were comfortable working from home and we just couldn't get them, you know, at that point in time. And then I had other employees who were dying to come in. They really missed the collaboration. They were like more in like Ron's environment, you know, the teams that innovate and work together and they need that, you know, collaboration. So we kind of had to pivot on the fly and just say, how do we set this up? You know, maybe it's not quote equitable because not everyone's getting equal time in the office, but recognizing who needed and wanted to be there. And so we gravitated towards that, which then created this, you know, it was just the starter that we needed in order to get off the cuff there. And then we've seen on average 50 to 70% occupancy on any given day. And now we're developing, now once people are in, it's a new habit. And that's really probably the biggest thing is getting people comfortable with what's their path of travel. If they're in a large city or they use mass transit, how do they feel comfortable getting to and from the office, or reestablishing those norms for themselves. And then just a big plug for amenities, being available. This is what's attracting employees back, right? Is when you get to the building that the restaurants are open, that coffee shops are open, that there's something to go to. And our building here has been extraordinary with getting those, services open. So it feels vibrant, you're part of something.
So as a real estate professional, you recommend everyone should move to a new office during the pandemic?
There you go.
Flip things
I think it
over,
would definitely
trade.
help us come back. Yeah.
There's a question from one of the audience members that's perfect for you about this, the 3-day per week average in the office and what impact that might have on space requirements. So the question says, for example, if a tenant had 20,000 square feet in 2019 with full time at the office, how much space might they need with a 3-day-a-week workforce?
Right. So we're not recommending going much smaller. I mean, between, space needs, and we're still in this is a new, it's a new day. So we're really not recommending going much smaller. I think the most that you could see a retraction maybe is less than 20%, if you're really looking at your space needs. But, until you've established what that working environment is going to look like, I think I'd tread carefully, with any drastic reductions. Yeah.
Makes sense. And one question about China. I don't know if the research continues there, but are there parts of China now that are where we will theoretically be 3-6 months from now that have like high rates of occupancy and like the businesses around the things all thriving and everything?
Yeah, they were largely back and stayed back, but there are restrictions, and I don't have the data. Like I didn't look that up. What they're doing right this moment, but I will say that their restrictions and the way they've handled, lockdowns and case loads and things like that have been a lot stricter than what we're doing in the US. So that probably has kept them in the office or working and back to work longer. Mm-hmm.
And Ron, I want to come back to you. It's a very specific question. I don't know if this is something you can answer, but what have you done and what do you recommend others do in preparation for reintegration to analyze airflows to find systemic infection control problems and to improve air refresh and filtration? Is that something you can address?
Just at a very kind of superficial level. Our staff expressed questions and concerns about that coming back. We design buildings every day, so we have access to clients and mechanical engineers and kind of technical support that most others don't. So we asked many of our colleagues in the industry, as well as talked to our building, and learned that our building had upgraded already the air filtration system in the building. I can't give you all the technical specifics, and what we've learned across the country, many office buildings have already acted to do that. They've upgraded their air filtration systems in order to at least make people feel more comfortable. There's a debate as to whether it's really effective, but the psychology of it feels good.
So a really big fan then, the bigger the fan, the better people feel if they see a big fan blowing when they walk in the front door? Okay.
I suppose the technicalities of it is that they put a finer filter on the air circulation system, and so they're able to filter out the particles of contaminants at a finer level. It's the same kind of technology that they use in laboratory facilities and hospitals and airplanes and what have you. It's just a finer filtering system.
And getting back to the MKA approach of having everybody there in the office, and not to go too deep into history, I'm more interested in the current status of things, but how did you know that that the collaboration was faltering, first of all, back, a year plus ago? And then how has it gone in terms of what you expected it to get back to that level of collaboration since you guys have been back since July?
So briefly, our company is 101 years old, and we've been in Seattle that entire time, downtown Seattle. And we've been particularly successful, thankfully, getting to work on some of the most amazing projects all over the world. One of the ingredients to our success, we feel, was the fact that we all co-located in Seattle. We have one office and we work together regularly. We preached that prior to the pandemic, and that's the trajectory we lived. When we all went home in March of 2020, we didn't really know exactly what the impact would be. And it took several months into the summer of 2020 before we really started to see some measurable impacts in terms of productivity, effectiveness, quality of work product, things that we could actually really measure. And over the course of the last 18 months or so, as we were working from home, all of the data points that we were able to measure suggested, for us at least, that we saw about a 20 to 25% drop off in our effectiveness, as measured in a number of different ways. But it was very clear and evident that for what we do and how we do it, we're far more effective when we're together in one place. And so we were very eager to get back, not just because it is kind of better for the business, but it's just better for all of us because we love what we do. We love that creative, interactive, collaborative, inventive environment that we're in, and it really only works when we're together. I travel around the country a lot. I've been on an airplane 4 or 5 days a week since July. And I see around the country and working with our clients in other cities, that same kind of energy and that return to the collaborative process. So yeah, we're quite happy with how things have evolved.
Because I mean, the premise is it's not the formal meetings, where the real spark happens. It's the impromptu, unplanned, just the interaction that you can't schedule, or you can't, there's no technology that can come close to or is there a technology that can come anywhere close to recreating that impromptu, just non-scheduled interaction, collaboration like that?
Yeah, we haven't found it yet. Yeah, just the kind of the casualness and the ease of bumping into somebody next to the copy machine, or just passing them in the hallway and, oh, by the way, I have this question for you. That stuff is just so natural and regular when we're together. And when you have to like schedule a Zoom meeting to have that discussion, it just falls apart.
Yeah. And in terms of, since you've been back in July, how long did it take you to know that, okay, this was good, we're seeing that 20% thing is gone now, we're back to 100%, or we're back to 95% or whatever? How long did it take for that all to come back?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. When we first announced to the staff that we're coming back in July, we had about 70% of the staff return immediately. And the hindrance to the remaining 30% involved transit, number one, because back in the summer, the transit system was not operating at its full schedule. And number two, childcare was a big deal for a lot of our younger staff. Over the course of the summer and into the fall, those kinds of items have sorted themselves out. The transit system's back up and running at its kind of normal schedule now. Kids are back in school. Childcare is basically more or less back up and operational. So that allowed everyone to come back. And with everyone coming back, and the way, if you're an engineer like us, we're like data hounds. Data tends to trail the actual what's happening by a month or two, because you have to collect the data and process the data and what have you. So while perhaps we saw a big boost in July, we weren't able to really measure it until maybe September, October, to where we're seeing now we're back not only to where we were pre-pandemic, but in many areas we're exceeding where we were, because there's this greater appreciation now for that togetherness and really leveraging that time, as opposed to before the pandemic. We talked about it a lot, but it was almost taken for granted because it was just how we had done it for the last 100 years. So that's just how it goes. And then that took it away for a year and a half. And everybody was like, oh, I'm missing that. And now that we're back, there's this greater energy about those collaborative moments and times, and a greater appreciation of them.
All right. I have an audience question I want to read for all of you, and we'll start with you, Michelle. This is, many companies are experiencing a generational divide when it comes to return to office. Older employees, perhaps with grown children, are tending to want to be in the office, and younger employees are appreciating the ability to work remotely and avoiding things that waste time and cost money, like commuting. Are any of you seeing challenges in this regard, and what methods have you seen work to bridge the gap between these populations and ensure collaboration and mentorship? Michelle?
Sure. I mean, it's a great question. I think communication is key, and we're talking about it, but we've been surveying all of our stakeholders and talking to them about how they're feeling and how they're feeling about this change. Part of some of the things that we're also doing with CBRE is that we've engaged all of our stakeholders in this process so that they get to talk about what makes, what works for them, how they're feeling. The survey that we did, 94% of our employees want to remain remote, but they want to be able to have that flexible hybrid. As you know, the cost of living here in Seattle is very expensive, extremely downtown. And so some of our employees, decided to move a little bit further away, or some of them do have those child or hybrid problems that they're dealing with, their own personal things that their stuff is. And so we've really engaged our stakeholders to really walk with us along this process. But the feeling is that they want to come to work, but they want the flexibility to be able to do that.
Yeah. Allison, what about you at Cushman Wakefield or the clients you work with?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to say what we're trying is a little bit the opposite effect, which is the older generation, or more older generation, or much more set up at home, much more comfortable with the work from home. Have a stability, I guess, maybe a nice space. Whereas the younger populations, maybe you're competing, maybe you have roommates or young kids at home or whatever, and so it makes the environment more challenging to be productive and learn. And so, but one thing we're encouraging is the mentoring component, right? So specifically in our Seattle operations, we've actually hired 28 people this year. And what we found is the new people, like they want, we're trying to establish what the culture is, right? And getting those people to integrate and get to know one another. So a lot of it is just structuring time in the office, encouraging the mentoring component, or whether it's formal or informal, but that learning and pairing people up on projects and assignments. So you kind of get our more senior team members, interested and engaged again in a way that they've been very comfortable kind of on their own. They haven't had the same impacts, maybe because they had a clientele and their business maybe stalled a little, but is now coming back, and they don't have those same challenges. But Michelle's absolutely right. Surveying your employees is the number one thing you can do. Taking the sentiment, listening. I mean, that's like what we keep saying. It's right, Michelle. It's really, really important that we hear that the employees know that we're listening and that we're implementing. On the fly, being nimble, being flexible, to just be able to admit too, we don't know, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to keep, tweaking as we go.
And it seems like the solution would be different based on the size of the company. As companies have only handful of employees, probably deal with stuff face to face or just on the phone or whatever, but much bigger organizations have a much bigger challenge, I think, like they would with any communications issue, because again, as we've said a few times here, it seems like the communications around all this stuff, as quickly as things change, as confusing as things are, or as, polarized things as things are sometimes, seems like communication is absolutely critical. What about, Ron, what about the generational issues like this at MKA?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a different nuance for us. Our younger staff are very thirsty and very eager to be in the office to learn, because the craft of engineering really is a craft and an art, and you don't get everything you need to do your job as a professional in school. And so the first many years of your career is spent drinking from a fire hose, learning every day. And so the young staff's very eager to be in the office. The older staff likes coming to the office out of habit, if nothing else. Where there's been, I wouldn't call it any friction, but I'd say if there's a group of people who are in the I don't really know category, it's more the staff that have young families, and that kind of pull of how to balance their family life, the care of their children, the kind of building of their life as a family with that balanced against their career. And that's where, Ben, I'd say some of the psychological struggle has been. What we have asked of everyone is to recognize for us, again, and it's maybe just very unique to us, that we feel very, very passionately that we are strongest when we're all together. And by any one of us, me included, choosing unilaterally to stay home because I'm going to work from home today, you've eroded the strength of the team. And it's about the team. And so we're really passionate about people coming to the office during those core hours. If you need to and want to have some flexibility on the front end or the back end, or you need to stay home for a day to take care of some personal business, fine, we're flexible. But from a habit forming point of view, we're a team and we're together, and we're committed to the team and making the team as strong as it can be.
Let's talk a little bit about sort of the bigger team, or sort of the ecology around the office places. And Allison, you touched on this a little bit already. So much of downtown's vibrancy is dependent on office workers being there every day and buying lunch or buying coffee or taking their dry cleaning, or just, contributing, pumping dollars into the local businesses that, the people can't work remotely. And if the office workers aren't there, the residential community picks up some of the slack, of course, but not all of it. Have you seen things? We'll start with you, Ron. I think you mentioned something about this the other day when we got together before this panel. Have you communicated with your employees about how critical it is that not just for your own company's success, but how their being there makes it possible for downtown to recover from all of this much faster than it would otherwise?
Yeah, indeed. We're very passionate about downtown Seattle, having been here for 101 years, and know firsthand the importance of that kind of velocity of business and the velocity of interaction, that businesses all support one another. So when we did bring everyone back to the office in July, among a number of swag bag items we gave them to welcome them back to their office, we provided everyone with a preloaded gift card focused on funding purchases at downtown Seattle businesses. And so everyone was given what looks to be a MKA branded credit card. It was a gift card.
I didn't get one. I didn't receive mine.
Here, I have one for you. But the message that we sent to the staff was, we feel it's really important to support downtown Seattle businesses. So please use this card at whatever businesses you choose to buy your sandwich or to go to the drugstore or what have you. But please patronize the downtown business, because that will help everyone else come back more quickly. And today, we're begging people, please come back, because we're very lonely.
Have you seen this, Michelle? I mean, the zoo isn't exactly in downtown Seattle, but you do have businesses around there, and businesses that depend on visitors coming to see you guys.
I mean, we see, a lot of people that we're working with, a lot of the vendors that are outside, the coffee places that are outside in the area. We're having them either come inside and do some special things for our employees. We're doing all different types of things to make sure that we're supporting the businesses around us, and collaborating with them on little things or incentives for our employees on a daily basis.
Yeah, it does seem, I think it's, with DSA's leadership, a lot of this talk about the ecology that exists between office workers and those small businesses that, that depend on downtown being full. And that's the fact we're talking about it. And I think it's discussed in just regular media. This comes up, this notion of how downtown bounces back, and how the multiplier effect that every single employee of an office-based business has on all those other businesses. I mean, it's not a secret at all. And that's why it's great that, Ron, what you guys have done with giving people the incentive to go out and just, pump dollars into the local economy. Allison, is this, I mean, real estate is the same kind of thing. There's commercial real estate for office space and for retail space and that sort of thing. Have you seen, I mean, what is Cushman Wakefield hearing from your clients, or what have you seen? Are other businesses doing stuff like what Ron did at MKA, or is it sort of the Wild West right now? What are you seeing?
It's a great idea, Ron. I wish I had thought of it myself. So, but truly, I guess one of the things that we've been, we're committed to downtown Seattle. We moved our office here. We have also an office in Bellevue, but we've been conducting happy hours and encouraging people to come, to office, and encouraging our clients and things like that. One of the things I was struck by, though, is our population in Bellevue. There were team members who had never come to the Seattle office, and I invited them over for an activity. And they were surprised. They were surprised at how nice, how more open Seattle was than they than they had in their head. And they literally had not been across the lake, in a year or whatever, for a variety of reasons. And so it was kind of eye-opening for me being new here, of just the importance, because downtown is an ecosystem. And even if you go with the model of 3 days a week, right? If you had employees coming in 3 days a week, think about the infusion of energy and on the streets, right? And then that encourages these retailers who are just barely, keeping it together or haven't been able to open yet. It gets them over that hurdle to get open and stay open. And then, one of the things that has been a popular topic, and I think it's all over the board, but is our office owners, the ones who have this activated retail level, is how do they activate their retail level, and do they work with the retailer? Do they provide, is it maybe a lost leader for them, but just to get the doors open? Because if you can get that energy and you can create the habit, for people to count on things, that just puts us over that edge that we need. And so hopefully this Q1 2022, is as predicted, and we start to see that resurgence of energy and activity on the streets. I think that's what we need.
Yeah, and we have one question from the audience about public safety, and asking if there's any experiences with specifically around transit and staff being unwilling or reluctant to take public transit because they're uncomfortable, waiting for a bus when, with the office population as low as it is right now, the number of people riding transit is probably similar or right around the same number. What is it? Give me a sort of a temperature check or a pulse check on how public safety is impacting the employees who are back or who are being enticed to come back. Ron, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So over the course of the path we've traveled, back in July, when transit was still running at a abbreviated schedule, we were providing, much to our chagrin, a parking stipend to our staff. Wow. To kind of help them bridge that gap of apprehension about public transit and safety related issues, to get them to start to form that habit of coming back to the office. And so over the course of the summer, we had many of our staff, well, let's say this a little differently, 90% of our staff rides public transit in some form. So, and we're very, very strong supporters of public transit. We provide all of our staff with Orca cards so that they can ride whatever they need to ride for free. It's just part of their benefits package. But there was a great deal of apprehension when first coming back. As the bus schedules and transit schedules started to resume, and with reports from their peers that, hey, this wasn't so bad, more and more people have gone back to a kind of regular public transit in our staff. And so the concerns over safety as it regards public transit have really been muted at this point for our staff. What remains a concern is because the office population in downtown Seattle remains pretty low and the foot traffic on the street remains pretty low, there is great apprehension by our staff still to go out during the day and walk around, in particular around certain parts of downtown Seattle, where we haven't had, fortunately, any incidents, but there's a great deal of apprehension because of the people that are on the street.
Allison, what's been your experience been like?
Well,
I mean, you're relatively new to Seattle. I don't know,
yeah.
what did you think when you arrived here earlier this year? Were you surprised? Was it worse than you thought it was going to be? Better? Did you have any kind of a...
Well, I'll tell you, it's challenging buying a home when you're not really sure. Everyone's told you what the commute's going to be like, but then literally the first 4 months, I just drove around the town, and I think I checked out every area of the geography, in an hour, right? Because there was no traffic anywhere. And so I had kind of a false sense of how congested I think we still do, right? And I was actually, so we've been, most of our population is car based, just because we have sales professionals, they're out in the field, they come and go. Some of our employees that come to the office, are maybe more don't have that requirement, they'll take mass transit. And so we have worked with them as far as their comfort level, and especially like Ron said, the bus lines when there was, more compression on how much availability there. But largely, some of them, I actually caught up with an employee the other night who took the train, and she said, right now I'm actually quite comfortable because there's less people on the train. So I think as things pick up, we'll have to kind of acknowledge that and work with our employees on their comfort level. But largely, it hasn't been a big issue for us.
We just have a few minutes left. I want to touch a little bit on politics, the recent election. Do either of you see any impacts on returning to the office based on who our new mayor is or changes of the city council, anything like that? Will that have direct impact as near as anyone can tell? Michelle, do you want to take a crack at that?
I mean, I'm a downtown resident, so I live right across from Heights Market. I hope that they, continue to infuse and help us continue to clean up some of the bad areas here. For my employees, they do take some of the bus, but we're a car-based, organization living about 10 minutes away from the downtown population. So I really hope that this new fresh mayor will take a look and help support a lot of these businesses, but also the cleanup, the homelessness. I'm on the board of Mary's Place, and so I'm hopeful for this new infused mayor and city council coming in.
Yeah. Ron?
Yeah, I share Michelle's hope and optimism about hopefully, but
Well, you said hope there twice. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of hope. Okay.
I have also a pragmatic view here, at least as a business leader, right? And where steps backwards have been really our government, from the state to the city to the county, they've been very quick to act to move backwards. But there's been almost silence moving forwards, and it's been left to the business community to move forward. And I think that's probably where we're really headed. I would love to see business and the political leadership lock arms and move forward together. But I'm not going to wait for that to happen. The business community, we're going to move forward and lead.
And you're speaking on global terms, not just about the pandemic. You mean everything moving forward. You don't mean specific. Okay.
Yep.
And Allison, what about you?
Mm-hmm. Well, coming from a very different state, Utah has very different political environment. And also, I guess something I learned in commercial real estate is the importance, especially of having a strong partnership it's in a downtown. It's like I said before, it's an ecosystem. There's so much investment here. Nobody wants it to fail. And so I think, being relatively new, but understanding, I think this is a positive, in leadership. And I'm hoping that I can help, and we can all help move this forward in the conversation, that there's a lot of positive to be had if we can work together. Everybody wants the same outcome, I think, which is a vibrant downtown that we're proud of. So
yeah, I mean, my hope is that I mean, the pragmatism that was there during some of the deeper parts of the crisis a year ago, where solutions were found and stuff just kind of moved right along. That's my hope in terms of a silver lining that emerges, that we have muscle memory of solving problems that were, crises in the moment, that they're also to approach some of these longer term issues that have been more intractable. Just have a minute or two left here. I want to give each of you about 15 seconds or so. Tell me one sort of silver lining from all of this that you think your firm or your organization will carry forward into the next year, the next decade, the next generation. What's something that you'll look back to the pandemic and say, oh, we do this way now because of the pandemic, and boy, we're glad for at least this. Anybody, do you want to start? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I think, it's just how we work differently. You really did a pivot of, digital transformation. It allowed us to look at our business and say, what are we going to stop doing? And what's working for us that's going to be more productive? And we've really learned to pivot on the fly. And especially with all the different mandates that are changing, is everyone has engaged in the word in flexibility is key, knowing that everything is going to change. And I think that's a very positive thing for us.
Very good. Allison, what about you?
Yeah, well, I would say we're incredibly proud of our firm during this time. It was a time, I think, that we came together in a new way and, forged a new path and really strengthened every voice within our firm. And I think, with the digital technology and infusion of teams and the fact that this is normal now, it helps create more voices within our company. So I think that's something we'll be very, very proud of, and is created a pivot for us.
Very good. Ron?
Yeah, for us, it was a very, very telling reaffirmation of something that we kind of instinctively knew before the pandemic. But that's just, we're better together. And there's lots of evidence to show why that is and how that is. So we're quite happy to be back together, and it's working better than it ever has.
All right. Well, I want to thank our panelists. We're going to get to our Alaska Airlines video in just a moment, as promised. I know you've been waiting for the whole hour, but I want to thank Allison Beddard of Cushman Wakefield, Ron Klemencic of MKA, and Michelle Smith of Woodland Park Zoo. I want to thank everybody for joining us for not only for this episode of DSA Virtual Access, but the whole series this past fall. Thank the fabulous DSA staff, John Scholes, Sally Wright, James Cito, Emily Baylor, Elliot Kravenko, and special thanks to Alaska Airlines. Hope you all have a great Thanksgiving next week. And I want to invite you to join DSA downtown on Friday, November 26th. It's 1 week from tomorrow already, hard to believe, for the annual tree lighting, and especially part that's really near and dear to my heart, the lighting of that great old star that's been completely reimagined on the old Bon Marché there. Until then, I'm Felix Manel for DSA. Thanks for joining us this morning, and we'll see you downtown.